Mental illness from a magical perspective, exploring mental health. Different religions, cultures, and medical traditions have different attitudes towards the mentally ill. But how does magic view people with schizophrenia? Is it something that can be treated, or is it incurable? Well, they are viewed in a similar way to people with non-traditional sexual orientations, with a slightly different understanding. The mentally ill, those who exist in several worlds at the same time and who see what others cannot, are treated with a great deal of respect and reverence. Mages try to protect such people because the mentally ill are natural psychics, people who can receive and send information from other worlds in both directions, not only from this world to another, but also from another world to ours. Schizophrenia, split consciousness, and altered states of consciousness are actually signs that a person's assemblage point has gained additional freedom. In other words, when viewed in a flat space, a person's assemblage point normally experiences horizontal shifts within certain boundaries relative to a particular chakra or subtle body. These boundaries are set by the system, the social system, the energetic system, and the three-dimensional world we live in. But the assemblage point of mentally ill people has crossed these boundaries, and it has done so unexpectedly that they just couldn't handle it. In magical practice, the assemblage point is gradually shifted. You touch the boundary, experience an altered state, then return to the status quo, assess it, learn to live with that experience, and then try again to swing the pendulum of consciousness in different directions. Then you gently push the boundaries once more, step beyond them, experience the moment of, oh no, I'm losing my mind, return to the status quo, breathe a little, analyze it, and then begin to shift the assemblage point again. In this way, you get a series of injections and gradually train your consciousness to adapt to these transitions. But for mentally ill people, this process happened spontaneously. They had no time to evaluate it. Their consciousness gained this sudden freedom, but they lacked the means to define or describe it for themselves. Their mental body was incapable of interpreting it. And it is the mental body that dictates a person's behavior. It determines how they act, what they say, and how they navigate reality. For such individuals, the picture of the world within their mental body is shaped by spaces they do not understand, do not know, and which this world does not recognize. As a result, their behavior is always somewhat antisocial. In magic, we understand what is happening and how difficult it is for these people to return to the reality we live in. It is especially difficult for their loved ones, who, naturally, understand even less. Mentally ill people need special attention and care because our perception of reality is unfamiliar to them and they may unknowingly harm themselves. For instance, if their assemblage point is severely shattered, they resemble 5-year-old children. They do not understand that fire is dangerous, that it can burn them, that sharp objects can damage them, even fatally, and so on. So, people around them not only have to explain these things to them, but also protect them from these threats. For this reason, they are often placed in mental hospitals where they can be monitored and cared for. Yet, their perception remains unchanged. People in such states of consciousness, with such a shattered assemblage point, often see and understand more than others. They provide information that no mentally healthy person would even think of. They can step into the future and see what is happening there. They can step into the past and see what has happened. They can enter completely different realms, even the world of the dead, and witness what takes place there, and so on. The problem is that they cannot adequately express their experiences in this world. If they use terminology unfamiliar to this reality, they are naturally perceived as insane, and that makes their lives incredibly difficult. It is fortunate if they have someone nearby who understands at least something about magic, even if only in theory, someone who will be able to stabilize their consciousness, fix the assemblage point, set certain boundaries, and firmly anchor the assemblage point within those boundaries. This can be achieved through magical rituals, incantations, or runes. It does not matter which method is used. For a time, a person will experience temporary relief, a break from their endless journeys. However, these boundaries must eventually be removed, because once the assemblage point has shifted into such an expansive space, it will always remember that it can attain far greater freedom than what is available here. Even so, the physical body needs time to recover. It cannot handle such high vibrations. This is why people with altered states of consciousness rarely live long. Their physical bodies simply burn out. They cannot withstand them. Does this mean that such people have no place in our world? In our
Мозга
world,
нет.
they are not needed.
Если они,
However,
например,
if they join a monastery,
храм,
the people there know exactly what to do with
то
such
мы знаем прекрасно,
individuals.
что делать с такой
Essentially, a
людьми,
monastic
да?
cell
И,
is
по
the same as
сути,
a
та же самая
straitjacket, but with the
смертельная
added
рубашка,
aspect
только за
that
ней
the
не
words of the
записывается.
mentally ill are
Это
written
называется
down and become
пророчество,
what are
это
known as
называется откровение
prophecies,
и прочее, прочее,
revelations,
прочее.
and so
Собственно
on.
говоря,
In
они
fact, this was where
клиниками
mentally
там
ill
рассказывают
people
о
often ended up
Ksenia,
in the Middle
о
Ages.
своем
If they were not sent to an
друге
asylum, they
Спасителе
were
Антоне,
sent to a
отправили в
monastery,
монастырь.
because such
Потому что
individuals
вообще-то
were
эти люди
considered
были
valuable. Many of them were
многие
later
осмелились
canonized, becoming spiritual
канонизировать,
figures,
там,
hermits,
прежней
and
женщин со
saints.
святыми, да, половина
Half of
были
them probably
шизофреники.
suffered from schizophrenia.
Половина. Кого не возьми,
Whichever
просто
legend
примерно
you
не
read,
посчитаешь,
all the
да,
signs point to it.
все. Просто с ними рядом находились люди, которые
They
могли
simply had
правильно
people
нести
around
их
them who could
и
serve them
правильно
properly and
понимали, что
understand the
они,
meaning behind their
что они
words.
несут.
But
А
today's social
сегодняшний
world doesn't
социальный
need
мир,
such
он
people.
в этих людях не нуждается.
And what about
Но вот эти
medications like haloperidol and
психоактивные они
chlorpromazine?
что
What
делают?
do they do?
Они
These
прибивают
drugs nail the
эфир
assemblage point
не
to the
эфир в
etheric
течение
body at a
нескольких
very low
тысяч
level where
невозможно.
such shifts of the assemblage
Там он
point
просто
become
не
impossible. At
способен.
that
Трехмерный
level, the
мир очень большой
consciousness is
размах,
simply
и ничего
incapable of
просто не
such
может
movement.
преодолеть
The
препятствия.
three-dimensional world is
Да, но только
incredibly dense,
зрение,
and the
оно
assemblage point
затягивает.
cannot
Сознание
break
человека,
through
оно
that
замкнуто.
density. It gets stuck,
Просто
as if in
потенциально
glycerin.
не
A person's
путешествует. То есть у него
consciousness
нет
fades,
процесса
and they stop
развития
traveling.
сознания, оно
There is no
находится в
development
информационном
of
состоянии, как
consciousness,
растение.
only a
По
half-sleeping,
сути, эфирка —
vegetative
это и
state.
есть правильное
Essentially, the
растение.
etheric level is that of a plant, and a person there is capable only of eating, drinking, sleeping,
Потому
and
что
relieving
метод себя —
themselves
это уже не
uncontrollably.
толеранс.
If a person manages to control
Это уже
these
правильное
functions,
поведение.
it already
Когда
implies
этот
the level of the
способен
mental
осуществить
body and the
социальное
presence of
поведение.
behavioral rules.
Валидол,
And for that to
пропирамидин и
happen,
прочие
the
вещи, они
assemblage
просто
point must rise.
эффективно. Чем
But these
выше, тем
medications prevent
безопаснее
that.
окружающим.
Haloperidol, chlorpromazine, and similar drugs simply nail the assemblage point down. The lower it is, the safer it is for the people around. Can a mage channel the talents of such a
Может, поэтому
person
надо
in a useful
заниматься.
direction?
Просто
Yes,
надо
they
заниматься.
can, but it requires dedicated
Рунами,
effort.
чистящими
Through runes,
моментами,
cleansing,
разговором.
conversation,
Там есть
there are various
различные
methods,
методы,
and they can be
комплексы,
combined, but
целомудренные
you have to
методы,
work at
которыми
it.
можно заниматься. Опять же,
Again,
этим
in
занимались и
monasteries, there
специальные
were
люди
special people
монастыря.
assigned to the mentally ill
Представляете
to
такого
work with
человека,
them,
да? И
serve them,
работали с
look
ним, и
after them,
обслуживали его,
write
и
down their
ухаживали за
words,
ним, и
ask the right
помогали ему, и
questions, light
записывали за ним,
candles,
вопросы
and
ему
say
задавали.
prayers when
Когда надо,
necessary,
свечку зажгли,
and
когда надо,
refrain from
молитву
doing
прочитали,
so
когда
when
не
it
надо, и
wasn't.
товарищ.
They had methods
Мы
and knew
знаем, все равно
exactly
другие
what to do.
представляем, как надо делать.
Unfortunately,
Это же
this
не
knowledge is no
помогает.
longer widespread.
Но поверьте,
But
есть
believe
еще
me,
тут
such orders still
экстраординарные. Сейчас
exist. They are
находятся в
just
Габоне,
hidden now, perhaps not as
в
developed as
Африке,
before,
допустим.
but the tradition
Но
still
традиция все
remains.
равно сохранилась. И я знаю, что есть
I know that
специальные
there are
люди,
special
которые
individuals
ищут
who
таких
seek
людей
out mentally
и
ill people,
исследуют их.
especially young ones. They look for people with
С
altered
иными
consciousness,
природными
altered by
изъявлениями.
nature,
И по всей
and take them
информации
by any
хватает,
means
собирают их
necessary.
себе. В Америке,
In
например,
America,
огромное
for
такое
example,
количество.
there are many such
В
orders,
Шотландии
and a few
самое
still
крупное
exist in
количество.
Scotland.
Вот,
In
во
France,
Франции,
I think
по-моему,
they no
уже.
longer exist, but
В
in
Америке
America,
точно.
they definitely
Почему
do,
они
and
забирают
they even
наших
take in our
детей,
children.
несколько
And in
детей
Russia,
уже
do
смотрят.
such orders exist? You
Знаете,
know,
оно
they
было.
existed.
Вот до
I know for
революции
sure
это
that
очень
such
было.
orders existed before the
А вот на
revolution.
сегодняшний день мне
However, as
неизвестно
for
ни об одном
today,
действии.
I'm not aware of any
Если
active
они
ones.
есть,
I'm
я
not
не могу
saying they don't
проверить, я
exist,
говорю, что
just
я
that I'm not aware of them. I know about the ones in America, but not about those in Russia. What I do know for sure is that they existed before the revolution. And do you teach how to help such people using runes?
Конечно.
Yes, of course. There are specific formulas for this. I have the study program where I provide the generally accepted formulas. But if a student has a particular task, we can develop a set of ritual actions with all the necessary formulas and appropriate steps, creating step-by-step algorithms that are not part of the program. It's really not difficult. You just have to approach it correctly, and everything is possible. Because runes channel energies that do more than just stabilize consciousness. They stabilize it properly. They don't lower the assemblage point, they keep it at the same level, simply giving it the ability to move under control. This prevents extreme shifts, and if they do occur, they become increasingly rare until, eventually, they stop altogether. You just have to learn how to manage this process. I don't really recommend using Christian methods, such as prayer, fasting, and so on, because unfortunately, they don't lead to the desired result. They work on the same principle as haloperidol, affecting the psychic and spiritual levels, but without harming the physical body. While all these chemical drugs cause immense damage to the physical body, Christian methods produce the same effect, but without such harm. However, the effect on consciousness remains the same. But look, if such a person has come into your life, it means that there is a need for them, perhaps not the need of the system, but the need of a particular force. Could it be a family curse? Or maybe it could be a family gift. It seems more like a curse. It looks like a curse to those around them, because having such a gift makes the lives of everyone nearby difficult, very difficult. You know, there's a saying that nature rests on the children of geniuses. Well, if a family has a natural-born psychic, sorcerer, or mage, then nature rests on the other members. You wouldn't believe it, but it makes everyone in the family serve that person. And their whole life becomes devoted to them and dependent on them. Isn't that right? I wouldn't want that. You do have choices. If the gods have decided that such a person will appear in your life, it means that they are offering you a chance to gain information that you would never have received in any other situation. And that information is very important to you. Try to look at the situation from this perspective. I understand that it's very difficult. I know it's very hard. But try it.